Welcome back to the channel, and today we're taking a look at the brand new Wolf Knives Venom Jack. This is the version 2, the second time that it's come around, and they had some very beautiful looking scale options. I went with the all titanium scales with the rock texture, looks like pattern on there with the dark blast and that beautiful purple anno on the tie hardware. They come in 3 other variations. You can get it with blue marble carbon fiber, and that one has a hand satin blade. That one looks really nice as well. They have one with toxic green camo carbon covers and black wash blade along with the black wash titanium on it. There's also one with dark matter red fat carbon, and that one has blasted and tumbled blade and tie. And there's also a Blade HQ exclusive one that has Blue Canyon Rich Light scales. Those look pretty interesting. And a hand satin finish on that blade. And I think it says polished tie bolsters and liners, if I didn't read that incorrectly. I'll tell you, they all look very nice. When it comes to Wolf Knives models, this is my favorite or my second favorite. I go back and forth with the Venom and the Midnight Jack. I just enjoy them. So let's open this one up. You have that beautiful Warney blade. These come in at 6.81 inches long. They have a 3-inch blade that has a 2.64-inch cutting edge. Your handle's coming in at 3.81 inches. And on my particular one, you have this nice vertical belt satin finish. Nice top swedge that comes all the way down to that tip, giving you a very needle-like tip right there. And being this one's an excellent utility blade shape, that fine tip is going to work great for doing very intricate detail work. If you need to trace something out, or if you need to poke into something, do a drag cut. In-hand cuts are going to be excellent because you have all that straight edge, so you can have full power from heel to tip on this one. The only thing this is going to kind of struggle is cutting things on a flat cutting surface. Unless it's just a drag cut through something, that's going to work excellent. But if you have to do a slicing motion, then it's going to be pretty difficult unless you raise it up onto something, because you're not going to have any clearance with the handle. You have a nail nick on one side of the blade. You have a sharpening choil that should give you a bunch of sharpening life before it'll widen up. Looks like the plunge line goes all the way to about right here where my fingernail is. So you should have all that sharpening life before it widen back here. Now, I will say, if you're sharpening, you definitely need to be careful with your pressure back here, because that could cause it to flare out if you put a little bit too much pressure at the heel. One exciting thing over my original Venom Jack, this is one of the models that was in Bowler M390, which is an excellent steel, especially for a slip joint. However, the newer models are all in CPM S90V. I think they rock well from 60 to 62, something like that, which is excellent. This one has a full height hollow grind, and these, of course, they all come down so nice and thin. This one's ground to around 12 thousandths behind the edge. So let's see what it can do. Knife came with a good edge, and it's really gonna do well in this type of cutting. It's that straight edge makes it have the same power from the heel to the tip of this knife, and not to mention you have the outstanding geometry from this hollow grind. Slices so well. One thing I do like to do though is, after I'm done with my review, I usually lay the edge back to about 17 degrees per side on my Wolf knives, and boy, if you want to see them slice ridiculously well, then that's what I recommend. Now, just test and make sure there's nothing crazy going on with the handle, because my other version has the carbon fiber scales and it feels a little thicker. I don't know if that's true or not, but it feels like it. I wouldn't want to do very hard stuff like this for a while. I looked down the edge because I thought I cracked something, but it was just a piece of the wood broke. But if you needed to make some feather sticks, of course you could do that really easily, and it's going to be comfortable while doing so. This is the next thing that it'll excel at, is the drag cuts. It's a scalpel up there by that tip, very nice and thin, and with a good edge on it. This one has a good bit of toothiness to it. It's not the sharpest I've ever gotten out of box, but it has that bite to it that makes it go through the fibrous material a lot easier. And that's usually, when I sharpen my knives now, I usually put a low grit edge on them just so I can make them very, very aggressive. And they tend to grab into materials 10 times easier than, say, a polished edge on some of these steels. Especially S90V. I've found with all the S90V I've tested in the past that a good 600 grit edge stropped by 12 micron diamond emulsion or whatever, doesn't matter what kind you use, but 12 micron is the perfect recipe, in my opinion, for a good performer. It can handle just about anything you throw at it as far as, sliciness. And this is what I mention all the time. You gotta, in order to use this type of blade shape on a flat cutting surface, the only real way to do it is to lift it up onto something like a block like this. That way you have clearance for your knuckles. Other than that, you might be able to get just the tip down onto the material and try to pull through, but that is going to be very, very difficult. And I don't know if I talked about it in this video or not, but I am contemplating on changing any of the knives that have a straight edge, just changing what I'll do in the test besides this portion, just because it doesn't really make sense and it's just not fun at all. But I think it did well. I knew it would. I mean, the M391 did really well. This one did even better, so I'm happy with that. And yeah, it was fun to test it. I think I cut 200 pieces of the sisal rope, or 230, something like that, just because it was doing so well. And I'm going to sharpen it up after this one because I'm sure I dulled it out in some spots. I'm going to put me a thin edge on it. I'm trying to think if this is the last piece or not, but yeah, I think I cut 3 extra pieces of the sisal rope just because it was doing so well. That's about the only time you'll see me doing extra sisal rope, being that I'm not testing for edge retention. I'm just trying to see how it feels while it slices and make sure nothing crazy goes on while I'm doing this stuff. But as you can see, it did an outstanding job, or is still doing an outstanding job. The only bad thing about testing a Jack Wolf knife is that every knife I test after this today is going to be absolutely miserable, because none of them are going to be ground as thin and slicey as this knife. So that's the one drawback. I think it's a good drawback to have, but I wish more companies would start giving us some nice thin hollow grinds. That'd be outstanding. But until then, I'll just keep using Jack Wolf knives. Well, just as I expected, this one performed really, really well, and it was enjoyable to test. Now, one thing that I'm really considering cutting out of the test when it comes to the straight edge knives, I'm not sure, y'all tell me what y'all think. I might cut that type of rope cutting out and add something in its place that is more conducive to a Warney blade. It's definitely not a knife I would go to grab to do that kind of stuff. And I just want the test to be geared more toward the knife. So we'll see. I don't know yet. I haven't finalized that. But now let's talk about the ergos real quick. You have nice contouring on those scales. There's no real hard angles anywhere that were uncomfortable. The only thing that you're going to notice if you do a lot of cutting for a long period of time, the thinner scales are going to start to fatigue your wrists and forearms a little bit quicker than something with thicker hand-filling scales. The scale's coming at 0.44 inches. So not the thinnest I've ever cut with, but definitely on thin side, but not super thin for being a slip joint. Definitely works for all the type of cutting I would be doing with this. Main stuff I do day-to-day basis, break down a bunch of cardboard boxes, and then sometimes whenever I'm doing different types of odd and ends for my wife or the kids, might be cutting like plastic clamshell packages and stuff like that. That's why I do the test, because I enjoy using knives. Now let's take a look at the walk and talk. I don't know how to rate it, but this one has such a nice crisp pop to it. Just listen to it. Nice half stop, of course. They're all flush in the half stop position. And that close. Whew, And I was doing this the other night. We were watching a movie. I look over, and if looks could kill, I wouldn't be here anymore. My wife was looking at me like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "What? I'm not doing nothing." She was like, "Put the knife down." So yeah, nice and positive pull on it. You know, they're all usually pretty spot on. I haven't had any that deviated from the rest. I think the last time I got my neighbor, which he's more of a slip joint aficionado, to look at one of my Jack Wolfs, he said about 6.5 to 7. And, you know, these feel just like the previous Venom. And he's checked that one out as well. So really nice, very crisp, and no blade wrap closing it. I hadn't had any issues. Now let's take a look at this handle area. I think this is the only Jack Wolf I have with solid titanium scales. I could be wrong, but it's definitely the only one I have with textured titanium like that. It's got a dark blasted finish, which contrasts nicely with the satin blade. Love the pop of color with the purple anodized titanium hardware. You have Torx T8 for your body screws, a T10 for the pivot screw. Nice contouring on these scales. And none of these peaks are uncomfortable. They definitely knocked off the peaks to that before they did the blasting, or that blasting knocked it off, one of the two. Your back spring is perfectly mated. These are hafted, so that just means that they are grinding them after they put together, so they're numbered. So everything fits perfectly. And sorry if y'all can hear my dog. He wanted to talk about the walk and talk, and I didn't let him. So the centering is right down the middle. And this one has very good blade to handle ratio. As you can see, pretty much 1-to-1. That back spring comes up a little bit so you can't come in contact with it in the closed position. They come with this nice leather slip. It's got the Jack Wolf logo embossed in it with the Jack Wolf knives underneath it. Mine's nice and soft and supple. I did carry it in this a few times this week, but I also have a couple of other custom slips that I usually carry my slip joints in, so that's where this was carried more often. But if you don't want to have to buy anything, these are really nicely done. And also on his site, he also has some custom slips made by a couple of different makers as well. One thing that I really love about this one and a lot of the other Jack Wolfs, that I can pinch to open it, because somebody like myself, you know, I was in a bad accident, so I don't have good dexterity with my fingers anymore. And it's very hard for me to use a nail nick. I'm not going to say it's impossible for me to use a nail nick, but for the most part, if it has a nail nick and that's the only way to open it, I'm usually just not going to use it that often. But very easy, being that you have this blade that sticks up a good bit. The spring tension, in my opinion, on this one is perfect in the open position like that. So if you put your thumb right there, you don't have to worry. I mean, it's not going to easily come down. And I mean, anytime I'm using a slip joint, I treat it like it's a friction folder anyway. They're not super dangerous tool if you're treating it like it doesn't have a lock. I mean, you know, I've cut a lot of stuff with these, and, you know, I've never once feared that this thing was going to close up on me. You'd have to be doing something dumb. I mean, you know, plain and simple. Had somebody comment whenever I did my first impressions of this. He said, "That's dumb. Why would you ever use a slip joint? Why?" And I'll be honest, before Jack Wolf came along, I didn't use many slip joints at all. I think I've only had a handful of them, and I didn't really carry them much. It wasn't until Jack Wolf that I started carrying them. And why it's easy for me to want to carry this, because there's not many companies, and I can't really think of any that grind their knives as thin as this, but maybe like Civivi, but with some S90V steel. And you're not going to see We Are Civivi hardly. I don't think they've ever used those steels. But these hollow grinds are so nice and slicey. And that's what's attractive to me. Besides the looks, to me, they're beautiful. They're super well made. And besides the cool factor, and there's a lot to love with the traditional knives, you know, and the modern traditional. And they like every aspect, kind of like I do on a locking knife. But I think anytime you can cross somebody over into another genre, especially in the knife community, I think it's cool, and I'm happy to carry them now. And it even has me looking at other slip joints, which I didn't do before. The weight on this one in grams is 77.7 grams, or 2.74 ounces without the sheath, and with the sheath, it's coming in at, we'll call it 3.32 ounces. Quick size comparison with the Jack Wolf Knives Midnight Jack, which it's a little bit longer than the Midnight Jack, and it's almost identical to the Jack Wolf Knives Feel Good Jack. Here it is next to the Rosecraft blades, Nolichucky, and the Lion Steel Roundhead. And lastly, here it is next to the Ontario Rat Model 2 and the Benchmade Proper. And as far as nitpicks and complaints go, this is just a minor nitpick, and it has nothing to do with functionality of the knife whatsoever. But when I was talking about sharpening up this knife, if you put too much pressure at the heel and at the tip, you're going to widen that up compared to the rest of the edge. And that's usually the areas where people put more pressure because they're trying to get closer to that side. I do it all the time. And that's what happened whenever this one was sharpened, because you can see it started to flare ever so slightly right here. I mean, just barely. And that's just from a little bit extra pressure. Because that plunge, I'm looking at it. And if you look, well, you can't really see. If you look down in here, it doesn't start thickening until right here where my fingernail is. And you can look on this side. This side is not flaring out. So it was just, he might have accidentally bumped it a little bit harder whenever he was sharpening it. And that's going to get fixed after the first sharpening. But other than that, I mean, this thing is almost flawless. There's nothing else I can find on it that, I would change or want different. It's absolutely stunning, heirloom quality. I know they're pricey, but it's a premium product. I know Ben, he's not trying to rip anybody's face off. With the handwork that goes into all these and what it takes to make up a slip joint that is as nice as this with the premium materials that they're using, I can promise you that price is warranted. But if it's too rich for your blood, or you'd never spend that kind of money in a slip joint or anything like that, there's other affordable options. I mean, I'm not trying to convince you there, because usually people's minds are made up. I know I've made my mind up on certain things as well, so that's fine. There's no reason for anybody to get all bent out of shape about it. I understand. I'm not trying to say you have to buy this or anything. But if it is something that you're interested in, I will have it linked down below in the description. If you have any questions in particular, feel free to ask me. I'll do my best to get back with you. Sometimes I don't have enough time in the day. So I hope everybody's having an absolute amazing day. I will see y'all on the next one.